Welcome to Open BxRx Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Several students across America are protesting racist school practices with the power of reading. After the ban of several Black books in schools, students formed book clubs in support of Black authors. Joining me for discussion on this is Associate Director for School Support and Outreach at the New York Public Library, Shauntee Burns-Simpson. Shauntee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about education within the NYPL and your role working with school support?
Sure. NYPL has just started a new department called the Center for Educators in Schools. And we work directly with the school community, whether that be teachers, parents, students, to really let them know all of the amazing things that they have access to with their library card.
Now, as somebody who works with a library, what comes to mind when you hear that books, just in general, are being banned in schools, especially books in relation to history?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is silencing because it's identities, stories, and perspectives that aren't allowed to be heard, which lays the groundwork for bullying, disrespect, violence, and attacks.
So, according to NBC, some of the books that have been banned include a book about Rosa Parks, Hidden Figures, a story about Black female mathematicians, and the documentary I Am Not Your Negro about the author and cultural critic James Baldwin. Why do you think these books are controversial in 2022?
These books shouldn't be controversial in 2022. These books can draw up curiosity in the reader that makes them question what they might have been told and urges them to learn more. And that's what we should want because that's the learning process and can bring us together so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past.
How does this perpetuate racism within school education to ban these types of book relating to Black history?
It perpetrates racism because students are only hearing and learning one narrative, the white narrative, which sends a message to Black, Spanish, Asian, and Native that your story, your experience doesn't matter, which then sends a message to white students that whiteness is important and superior.
Now, I think this is super unfortunate that this is happening during Black History Month. Why is it crucial that these books remain available in schools, especially during this month?
I mean, these books need to be in schools for teaching and learning all year long, not just to be talked about and learned about in February, because I'm going to speak for myself and other Black people. We're not just Black in February, we're Black 365 days of the year.
Now, I think this is really interesting that we're seeing this happening predominantly in white schools, where Black children may already face challenges with their identity. How will the banning of these books further contribute to that?
Again, when students don't see themselves in the books, it sends the message that they don't belong or matter. So pulling these books off the shelves, that just confirms that message.
And how can, I guess, in general, books, because you work with the NYPL, how can books in general be a tool to strengthening the identities of young people and possibly even adults?
Uh, Books allow everyone to build on existing experiences and knowledge to learn. If one can't understand or relate to what they're learning, how will that information ever resonate? How can the person reading the story feel part of the history when, again, if they're not seeing themselves in it? So, books are that teaching tool to allow them to see and learn more about themselves as well as other people who are different from themselves.
And I like to learn a little bit more about your experience working with the NYPL. How have you seen, the presence of the New York Public Library strengthen schools within New York City and just strengthen education for kids in New York City?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, I will say that My team, specifically the school support and outreach team, it's about 8 outreach librarians that are going out into schools, and they're working very closely with educators as well as students. So we are providing workshops for parents so that they know how to engage with literacy with their child. We're working closely with educators so they're able to use NYPL's resources in their lesson planning and learning more titles, new diverse titles that they can incorporate in their lesson plans and in the classroom. And then again, we do amazing read alouds and book talks to students to get them really aware of these new titles by great authors, diverse authors, and get them excited about reading.
Now, I love that you brought up diverse authors. I think that for any child, it's important to kind of just read another experience different from your own. Now, of course, like the books that we mentioned earlier are important for Black children to read. But can you explain why it may also be important for non-Black children, that being Asian, Latino, whoever, to understand these stories as well?
It's important for all students to read diverse books. I mean, we all, not even just students, all of us to read diverse books because it encourages us to learn about our neighbor next door, down the block, around the corner, next state, in another country and around the world. This world is huge, and we have to prepare ourselves, our kids, to live, work, and grow alongside people who may not be the same race, religion, socioeconomic status. And stories help make that happen. And that's why books are extremely important.
So, upon my research, I found out that some non Black parents claim that the reason for banning these books was an effort to shield or protect their children from racism. Do you agree with this? And do you think it could actually be a little bit more harmful than good?
I mean, it's actually doing the opposite of what parents believe. Diverse characters and stories, they teach us empathy. It could be challenging for children of different backgrounds and races to understand and connect or care about each other. So often, non-Black students, they don't have the windows into the racism that their peers might be facing, and they don't see it. So if they don't see it, they can't learn from it or help stop it.
Black history and the Black experience can be heavy to handle, even for adults. So I can imagine the weight is a little bit heavier for children. How would you encourage Black parents, as well as others, to find the best ways to inform their kids about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Parents should read the book first so that they know if the content is age appropriate. So again, we're not going to give the autobiography of Malcolm X to a second grader. But if the subject matter is challenging, follow up with your librarian, your local librarian in the public library. If your school has a school librarian, that's fantastic, to get additional information as well as support in discussing some of the topics that are in some of the books.
Now, I really like to know a little bit more about what the NYPL is doing to celebrate diversity and celebrate Black History Month. You mentioned some workshops and books that you're reading. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, absolutely. So if you go to nypl.org, you can see all of the amazing programs that we are offering across the system around Black History Month. I will like to highlight that we have the Schomburg's Black Liberation List. And we also have a very new list that's catered to educators and students and parents, and it's called Vibrant Voices. Again, this list is for kids, teens, and adults. So everyone can find a title. And this list is for authors from of color. So we have Black, Indigenous, everyone part of this Vibrant Voices list. So if you are looking for a particular author, if you're just looking for new stories or welcoming stories or just stories that can just bring you in, help you learn, then that's absolutely a list that you should definitely check out. And all of that could be found at nypl.org.
Right. So, is there another way that people can stay up to date with the NYPL? And I also want to highlight the Schoenberg Center a little bit since it is Black History Month. How can people learn a little bit more if they're looking for more Black education?
Oh yes, the Schomburg Center is amazing, and they do a lot of work with educators and the community as well. And so, yes, you could also get to the Schomburg from nypl.org. If there's any questions, you could always email school support at nypl.org, as well as CES at nypl.org, and that's part of the Center for Educators in Schools, which is part of school support and outreach. We're part of that department team.
Amazing. Shauntee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.